We can start this webinar. So hello everyone, and welcome to this INA webinar on why specialized blue lighting routing is crucial for dispatch. And excuse me with the sound. So today's webinar is hosted by INA, as most of you probably know. My name is Sanna Antila, and I am the communication officer at INA. And it's my pleasure to be with you today and open this session on behalf of our organization. And for those of you who may be joining for the first time, INA is dedicated to improving emergency communication services across Europe. And we serve as a platform for emergency services professionals to exchange best practices and address the challenges faced by emergency services. And we also engage in advocacy efforts with European institutions and other relevant organizations to enhance public safety. So today's webinar is part of our ongoing commitment to facilitate knowledge sharing and professional development within the emergency services community. And today we are joined by Rescue Track, who are also sponsoring the webinar. And this webinar will look at how better routing and smarter use of data can help emergency services arrive at the scene faster without needing extra staff or training. There will also be a Q&A session towards the end where you can pose your questions, and we'll save some time for you to get some answers. And I would like to take also this opportunity to thank our speakers for their time, and also thank you all for joining us today. And before we begin, a few housekeeping rules. So we first of all, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available later on our website, most likely tomorrow. And since we are using Zoom, there are automatically translated captions that are available. So on the screen, you can see how to turn the captions on if you would like to use them. And we are using English, so you can set that as your starting languages. And before we begin with the main content, I would like to invite you all to join Slido, and I'd like to ask you just a few questions there. So you can open Slido with the QR code on the screen, or you can go to slido.com #INA and open it there. So I will just jump on to Slido, and you will have the code in again there in just a second. Perfect. So I see that some of you have already been able to join Slido. So there's again the code if you want to join. But the first question I'd like to ask is, where are you from? And I see that we have many people from Germany joining today. And I'll give you a few seconds to answer, and we can see from where in the world are our webinar viewers today joining. We have also some from Switzerland, Lithuania, Austria, someone from Spain, and Denmark, Sweden, and UK, and many other cities joining as well. Some people are also from Czech Republic. That's great. We have a strong representation around Europe. And after this one, I'd like to ask you, which sector do you represent? So are you from emergency services or public authority, from a private company, a non-governmental organization, academia, or other? You can see where our viewers are coming from. So at the moment, it seems we have a strong representation from emergency services and public authority here in the webinar with us. Okay, I think we can conclude that a lot of emergency services and public authorities are here. So I think now we can jump back to the webinar, and I'm sure you all are ready to get started. So if you have any questions to ask during this webinar, you can ask them throughout the webinar, but we will go through them in the end. So you can wait until the end to get your question answered, and you can submit your questions through the Q&A feature, which is in the bottom row next to all the other icons. You can find the Q&A box there, and please use this Q&A rather the chat, because if you put your question in the chat, we might miss it, but in the Q&A, we can see all the questions, so your question will be answered. And now to start the webinar, I'd like to introduce Daniel Korn, the CEO at Rescue Track, who will be telling us more about the topic of today's webinar. So Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tanya, for the introduction, and I'm happy to show a little bit of things that some people might have seen already at INA's conference 2025 in Helsinki. But we got so many questions, and honestly, we could not respond to all of them at the venue because there were simply too much of them. And also, the conference room was fully packed. So I'm glad that we have another virtual stage here and a recording for other people to see it who are interested in it. So topic today is blue light routing. And I'd like to start with a timeline of an incident, which I got from data that the state of Baden-Württemberg, with 11 million inhabitants in Germany, collected 10 years ago. And there's a good reason why I'm taking the old data. We had call times that were 2 minutes and 10 seconds long. Average dispatching time was 1 minute, 12 seconds, and driving time on average 6 minutes and 14 seconds. This is the time that the patient has no professional care. This was 10 years ago, and industry, and also thanks to INA and all the other participants, we improved a lot. We are quicker with the call times today. Much of it comes from AML. The localization of the caller is something that, thanks to technology, we can accelerate a lot. Dispatching also became quicker because usually we have GPS location of emergency resources. So we can take this task and ask the computer and the dispatch software to make a suggestion which ambulance we should take, which is the quickest one. So that task is also half automated or assisted. But the driving times is something that has not improved because we have not put the focus on it yet. And while call time and dispatching is good to improve, driving time is by far and was, and now relatively even became more of an issue. And it's the biggest part of the time without professional care. So that's something that we should maybe now shift our focus, because improving call times and improving dispatching times will not gain much. So everybody uses navigation on their phones. Why can't we simply use that in ambulances? Ambulances do take maneuvers that others cannot, and they also drive faster on some roads. So obviously there are differences. So we need to tackle them, and I want to show you what those differences are and why it matters. But routing is not only navigation. While obviously it comes to everybody's mind because everybody is using a navigation app on their phone, there are many more aspects to routing that come into our processes in the dispatch center. So which ambulance is the closest? Something that I mentioned earlier. This is the dispatching time that gets better, but there are even more questions that require routing. So the first question is, which ambulance is the closest? That's what we discussed earlier. But the dispatcher also asks, should we deploy first responders? And he also asks, should we deploy a helicopter? And the ambulance is then asking, where should we go? And this is navigation, but the first three questions were purely based on routing, or maybe not even a human asking that question, but a process in a computer program in the CAD. The ambulance will also ask, when will other forces arrive? And not only humans are asking questions, also machines might ask questions, like a traffic light. Traffic light might ask, will the ambulance pass here? And if so, when? The hospital, well, there's the question, which hospital is the closest? And also, when will the patient arrive? And in the end, the dispatcher, after he dispatched that mission, might ask, should I relocate another ambulance to improve my coverage for future incidents? So all these questions require routing. So it's more than only navigation. It's about a simulation in the very near future to anticipate when resources will arrive at which scene, or might arrive, to have different scenarios and choose the right one. So why is it different from navigation on my phone? Well, we can take maneuvers that you cannot take if you keep the code of the street. And if you want to accord to that, for example, here we have a special motorway exit. You can see it in the right side of the road. It's a highway, and here there's a sign that it's prohibited to leave or to enter here. And this gate can be opened manually. Of course, open a gate manually takes some time. Some are automated. We're going to see that later, but it still might be worth it. For example, here you see there's a cursor. If you have to go to the north all that way, it might take some time if you are there where the cursor now shows. So because if you go through all those two villages up there, it might take a couple of minutes. So even if you have to open that gate, this is where we show it here. I was showing the graph. Those are the magenta arrows that you see. Those are the options to enter this highway. And yes, it takes a minute, but still a lot less time than going all the way around. Special passage for fire brigade is also an example, like the first one I showed, this one and all the others that are verified. Verified means that either I have seen ambulances doing those maneuvers or have talked to people showing me that they did those maneuvers. So this is not theory, this is practice. And here you see two lift gates in the middle of a highway. And the situation is actually the following. You have the fire station, and you have that highway. And if you accord to the law of the streets, you do not pass there, but you have to go around for roughly half of the incidents. And if we go with blue light routing, then those lift gates open. In this case, this is fully automated. Those lift gates open whenever there's an alarm at that fire station. So it really saves you a lot of time in most incidents. And in that case, of course, everybody at the fire station knows that they can go past there, but the CAD system needs to know as well, because they calculate for an ambulance, for example, that you can pass there and that it takes less time. And that way you might select another ambulance that might not have been selected if the CAD system would not know that those kind of shortcuts are possible. So this is how it looks in the graph. And there again in magenta, you can see that there's a passage. Another example, straight ahead, ignoring a turn restriction. There's a turn restriction. You can see it on the road. You can see it on the sign with the blue background and the white arrow. Turning right is allowed. Nothing else is allowed. Obviously, you can go straight physically. You can see that in the image. And this is something that blue light routing should also take in account. And this is what we actually can do. So this is the route that you had to take if you just keep the rules of the road. If you don't, if you want to go a quick but still safe way, you can take that shortcut. Why can we take it? Because we analyze the data that we convert to the routing network. We do analyze the amount of lanes and which kind of lanes we have. We know about the traffic island, and we can find out that what we saw in the photo is possible as a maneuver to go straight ahead, and that it's safe to do so when you have blue lights turned on. Follow the bus. Same situation, but here you can see in the picture that the bus actually does not respect the turn restriction. They are turning left. And that's something that we can take also in account. That works, for example, here, I can show you. If you go from here to there, you have a route that takes roughly 9 minutes. If you go to blue light routing, you get a shortcut that takes 1 minute. How is that possible? Well, in that case, you were not allowed to turn left, because if you turn left, you would follow a one-way street in the opposite direction, which is obviously not allowed. But the bus is allowed, and this is something that we also take into account. We have embedded in the data the entire European public transport network, and we analyze bus stops and bus routes. And we know that the bus is taking this maneuver and that it's going the opposite direction of that one way. Which means that if you have a bus going the opposite, then there's for sure enough space for an ambulance and probably also for a fire truck. And this is why in this special case, we allow to go the opposite direction in one way. We do not take this everywhere. We only take it there where it's safe, and we collect hints that it's safe. For example, that there's also another lane that maybe has a cycleway that is 2 meters and 50 wide or wider, and then we know that we can do this kind. Here's an example from the Netherlands, where you can see that what they're famous for are the high amount of cycleways and also the size of the high cycleways. And here you can see a cycleway that actually has been taken. I've seen that by myself by an ambulance. Of course, they cannot go under the bridge because there it's not high enough, but the path that you see on the left side, this is where the ambulance actually went. So that is something where you can go really faster. But as I said before, we do not simply ignore one-ways. This example shows a quite narrow road, but not very long road. Technically, in most countries, you are allowed to take this one way the opposite direction, but it's not worth it. Why not? Because if you have somebody coming the opposite direction, seeing an ambulance coming towards them, they might get scared and you will get stuck. So in the end, either the ambulance or the other one is driving backwards because there's just not enough space for them to pass each other. Even if we have the information that you have sidewalks, we also have the information that there are trees, that there are bollards, and additionally in that case, which might not be included in the data, is that there's a construction site. But this will be a one-way that is respected even in blue light routing. But there are other hints than bus routes. For example, this is from Austria, Innsbruck. This is a street where you see you are not allowed to drive. But what we see are rails, and they are actually embedded into the tarmac. And if you have embedded rails and you know their gauge, you can derive the width of the tram And from that, you know that in the direction of travel of the tram, you probably can also go with a vehicle. So that way, we can allow to take this shortcut, which actually is a big one in Innsbruck. Here in Geneva, you see a good example of a one-way with a separate lane in the opposite direction. And actually, apparently, we managed to take a picture of a police car that took it the opposite direction. This might not look like a big shortcut, but in the end, if you have a few of them concatenated, it might change a lot of things for you. And also, what we see later with traffic, it might be interesting to see that traffic is an effect in one direction, but not in the other. An example from, I think everybody will recognize this, Paris is where you have a turn restriction to the right, and there is a taxi stand just next to it, but the sign shows it here, and we know that they have to take this direction and they are allowed to do it. So unfortunately, I was not able to snap the ambulance in time, but this is a good example of political traffic shaping and not allowing some maneuvers to avoid traffic in some areas and improve traffic flows. But ambulances are only a very few of the cars in the road, so they should definitely take those shortcuts, and it's definitely worth if they interrupt traffic a little. Driving through building passages, that's something that you will definitely not get from your navigation app. Here on the right, you can see a building passage that can be opened and is relevant, for example, if you go to that building, because we zoom in and we need to go to that building, then you have to drive through this. If you would stop at the highway here, there's no way to get through. You would walk all the way around. So it's really important to have that in the data as well, and to detect that this maneuver with blue lights is possible, but not without. An example from the Netherlands. This is a special maneuver that is installed on their highways. It's called CADO, which is for Calamiteiten doorsteek, which means urgency passage. And you see here, you're not allowed to pass apart from help and emergency services. Those bollards, they look solid, but they are actually wobbly. You can simply drive over them. They have some kind of spring at the bottom, and they're from soft material, so you can just drive over them and take that shortcut. And here I have an example near the city of Den Bosch, where you can see that now I have a route of roughly a minute, but if I go to that exit, I now have a travel time of around 15 minutes, because if I want to go there from the location where I started, I need to take 2 turns. And if I go to emergency travel mode, then I can take this CADO, this emergency passage, and I get a travel time of 90 seconds. And this is why it's so important to have that embedded into every process, because here again, drivers might know that they can take it. But if the dispatcher only gets a list of ambulances and selects the one that is the closest, he might be happy that he had an ambulance that was only like 8 minutes away. But he did miss that there is one that might only be 90 seconds away. And this is why you have to do that in every process and every question that we had earlier. Here's a lift gate. This is an alternative version. This is also in the Netherlands. This one obviously needs to be opened ahead of time. Those cannot be overrun without action, but they are remote controlled. And if you can remote control it, you don't want to drive there and waste time waiting until it's open. You want to open this ahead of time. And this is where routing really comes into play. You don't only get an estimated time of arrival from which you can deduce which ambulance is the closest, but you also get the geometry of the route, which allows to tell exactly in a simulated way ahead of time that the ambulance will pass there. And if you know the opening time of that gate, you can take that and start opening it ahead of time. So when the ambulance arrives, they do not have to slow down apart from the maneuver that they're taking. So they will not wait for that lift gate. There's a different topic that also comes into play when you do routing. You need to somehow have that coordinate projected on the street where to drive, because if we have a mission site that is inside a building, obviously you do not drive inside the building. You drive to a suitable part of the road that is close to where you want to go then by foot. So the strategy that most software uses and which is good in most times is jump to the closest street. We have a coordinate, we jump there, this is where we drive. That works very well. But there are cases where this does not work very well, and I want to show you some. Here you can see a building, and you can see a dashed line, which is the part that you would need to walk, which is not driving. And you can get the feeling, if you are not familiar with that area, that this is not the best solution. And I'm not showing an aerial picture, I'm showing a rendered picture. And this is no coincidence, because everything you see on the screen is something that the computer drew from the data that is in the database, which means that everything that we can see, the computer has seen as well. And if the computer shows different colors, it's because it has different semantics. Gray are buildings, black and other shade of gray are roads, and green is for vegetation. So everything that we detect and that we find maybe suspicious and not optimal is something the computer should be able technically from the data perspective as well. And I've taken a picture from that place, and if you drive there, actually that's not the perfect position to stop your ambulance and have fun with a stretcher through the woods next to the building. So what do you want to do? Well, we can take into account much more than only the road network. We take into account all the data that there is that helps to find a suitable routing coordinate. We have a building, and we know that the coordinate apparently is in the building. We have an entrance to that building, which is also in the data. There might be multiple entrances, and they might have semantics like main entrance, rear entrance, or emergency exit. And we have footways. So what do? We take the coordinate of the incident site, we do indoor routing, we come to closest entrance. Then we do foot routing for a defined distance, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. And that way we detect different points where we connect the footways to the roads where you can drive with your vehicle. And after finding multiple of those, we start routing not to only one, but to every of those connecting points. And then we choose the route that is in sum the shortest with the walking distance and the driving distance, which is in that case this one. So blue is what you do with your ambulance. The connecting point is where you leave your ambulance, and the green part in that case, and yes, it's a few meters, you have to go by foot. And that helps a lot. Let's see it in action. If you go there, you see it automatically snaps, goes to the main entrance, and follows the footways. And that way you can go to the right location with your ambulance without having to manually intervene with your data and to shift maybe the location of addresses, which is wrong. If you want to improve a system in the long shot, you need to really appreciate the perks, but also the hassles that you might when you have to add data to the digital twin. Yes, we have that building and we need that building to do this kind of routing magic. We need the information about the entrance, and also we need those footways. But it's much, much better to have it that way than to shift all coordinates to that connecting point. Because then, for example, if you had the forces driving to that connecting point, from there, they would not get the information where the actual incident site is. So we really need to map the reality into our digital twin as closely as possible. Building over a tunnel, that's a situation where the same technique helps a lot. Look here, I'm setting a destination, and you see that actually the ambulance apparently drives through that tunnel because of the location where it actually is. And now we set a destination, and that is inside the building. And if we would simply jump to the closest street, then we would simply stop driving into the tunnel because this is the closest street, because there's no information about the z-axis. But this is not what you want. You do not want to stop in the middle of the tunnel in that case, because you are here in the building. And that's how you drive around having this kind of additional information in the routing engine. There's another example where you can see on the right, there is the entrance. I'm showing it here it's about this building, and you can see here a lot of steps down there. And yes, it's true, the entrance is on the bottom right. You can see there's the house number, there's the gate, and there's also the bell and the letterbox. So have fun with the stretcher and the patient, bringing him up and down here. But what do we see as well? Well, the neighbor has a garage here, and he has a driveway. And through that driveway, you still have some steps, but much less. So what the footway routing takes into account is also the amount of steps that you need to take. And we want to minimize that. So if you go here, then the ambulance would not drive you to the road that accords to the address where you're driving, but actually to a location which is probably more suitable to get the patient out. What about rush hour? Well, rush hour is something that you could maybe take into account from commercial traffic data, but traffic jam's different if you have blue lights turned on. That example here from a German city of Heidelberg on the motorway shows perfectly how the vehicles are separating and how the ambulance can simply drive through. Maybe not at full speed, but at least at high speed. And when you have a traffic jam, there is also, in some cases, the reason for the traffic jam, the same reason why you're actually having a mission for your ambulance, because you might have had an accident. So it's maybe not beneficial to avoid this kind of traffic flow interruption at all, but to find a way to cope with it and to know where traffic is relevant and where it's not. And floating car data from consumers could theoretically take into account all the 733 billion kilometers that are being driven every year on German highways, but we're only interested in blue lights. So the blue light amount is 0.02%. Because we have a very big part of ambulance in Germany equipped with our hardware, we can approximate the average mileage that in all ambulances in Germany are doing. We cross-checked those numbers with the Netherlands, and we took another approach with the annual amount of kilometers that every ambulance is taking there on average, and we added that up, and the numbers match quite well. So we're confident about this one. The question is 200 million kilometers a year enough data? And without context, it's hard to tell. But we do have context. The German road network has a total distance of 700,000 kilometers. And if we divide those numbers, we get the information that every street segment is driven by an ambulance on average once a day, roughly. And we can see that. Here you can see data of 1 week. And you can see that the roads here, for example, that one has been driven 3 times. And that one has been driven roughly 7 times, so approximately once per day. And this dead end has not been driven at all. The good thing is that we actually collect data exactly where we need it, because our sensors are at the same time our consumers, the ambulances, or the fire trucks, or the police cars. And that way, we actually get quite good data of speeds that you can take when you're driving with blue lights. And here are the speeds. And it's maybe a little bit surprising that even if you have the same category of road here everywhere, then you still have different colors. This actually comes from different segments where you might have, in that case, another crossroad joining or leaving, and that's why you might need to slow down, or because you have a traffic light and there might be some other cars where you need to go around a bit more slowly than if there would be no traffic light. So here we have the data of one segment, and you see that we have always pairs of locations, and we take those pairs in account, and we do match the speed of the ambulance on those segments. And if we look at one segment and the speed distribution, you get exactly what you would expect. You get a normal distribution, which is not skewed, which is actually quite picture perfect in that case, which proves also that we have sufficient data to do this kind of statistics. And here you can deduce the speeds that you are driving at this segment. And with this kind of quite narrow distribution, it's fair to say that roughly between 30 and 35 kilometers per hour is the speed that ambulances are driving here. And this is not always the case. We also have, for example, this situation where you have one road that goes from south to northeast and has everywhere the same shade of green, apart from the location that is highlighted by the arrow. And there you can see that actually only one side of those 2 directions of travel is more bluish than the other. And it obviously has to do something with the other roads that are coming in there. But if we look at the distribution of speeds, now it's much harder to say which speed you're driving here. But I can explain that. What you're actually seeing are 3 maneuvers at this location. And the first normal distribution, the one to the right, is actually what happens if your ambulance is driving straight ahead. The second one in the middle is what happens when you are turning left to follow the other road in direction north, because you have to slow down a little. And there's a third distribution, which you can only see in half, because you cannot go slower than 0 kilometers an hour. This is where you have to stop because of traffic in the opposite direction. So what we take in account is not speed at a segment. We actually match those speeds on maneuvers, because we know which direction and which maneuver the ambulance actually took. So we do not know only that it was there, we also do know that it actually turned left. And this is how we can separate these speed distributions into maneuvers. There's another glitch, a glitch that we thought was a bug until we dig deeper. Now it's obvious, but it was not until we actually went there. What you see is that the ambulance is driving fast. It's greenish, and then it goes more bluish towards the location that the arrow is pointing out. And after the arrow, it becomes more greenish, which means acceleration, which seemed a bit strange. Why would you accelerate ahead of that crossroad? Well, if you look into that situation closely, you see that the building is far away from the road. And if you are here, you can see if there is traffic incoming. And this is actually the location where you can decide to accelerate again if you do not have traffic. So it wasn't obvious, now it is to me at least, that you're not accelerating in the middle of the crossroad in general, but you always accelerate ahead of a crossroad. And this is why we're quite confident that this system allows to really take in account how fast you can drive at which day of time, a time of day with ambulances. So the data is here. Let's use it. Blue light routing matters. Blue light routing will save you time, and blue light routing will save you the time that the patient might need to survive, will save you time that the building might not burn down, will save you time that your suspect will not be able to run away. To every blue light organization, EMS, fire brigade, and police, blue light routing is important. Blue light routing is base information to make decisions. If you do not take blue light routing in account, you might take wrong decisions. You might dispatch the wrong vehicle. You might go not the shortest way. You want to save time. And all the systems that come later, like a hospital that needs to prepare and is not prepared because you are actually driving maybe a blue light route, but the system in the hospital is not announcing you an estimated time based on blue light routing, you're losing time. If you want to influence traffic lights, or if you want to automatically open lift gates, then you need a system that allows to realistically simulate and give you reliable estimated times of arrival on different segments to that roads. So blue light routing is really the base. And it's important to use it everywhere to get consistent results. If you take a CAD system with a routing that might optimize a little bit, and you have a different routing in the vehicle, and they do not drive the road that the CAD system was proposing and that the dispatcher based their decision on, they might take longer. And this is where you would lose time. If you do not have that same route calculated in the vehicle as you are using to influence a traffic light, you might influence the wrong traffic light, or you might influence the same traffic light, but too late or too early. So it's really important that in every part of the process, you taking in account the same data and the same algorithms to come to the same results. If you are working with roadblocks, they are crucial to every single one of those participants in the system. If you have them only in one system, you will definitely get another route in another system. And then you have those discrepancies that will cost time. This is what you want to avoid. The good thing is it's very easy to integrate. Everybody uses routing already, but mostly they use a bad version, which means that probably every ambulance already has some kind of system to navigate. Every CAD system has some kind of routing engine to make a suggestion for the closest ambulance. And also hospital arrival systems displays are showing expected times of arrival based on some kind of routing. You don't need to teach users to improve that system. You simply switch the routing engine and you will get better results. So in the end, from an organizational perspective, you don't touch anything. But under the hood, technically, you're changing the engine to use the same everywhere and to use one that really respects blue light routing. And there's another topic where we haven't even talked about, that's specialized routing for fire brigades, but that's for another webinar. So let's discuss.
Thank you, Daniel, for this presentation. It was very interesting, and I think now we can take the rest of the time for some questions. And I see we already have some in the Q&A section. So Oliver, you can take over this part and present the questions to Daniel.
Yes, thank you very much, Sana. We got a first question from someone asking about, are there any ideas for emergency vehicles to be able to change traffic lights automatically?
Yes, we actually have implemented that. And that is something that is different from what system used to do a few years ago. Typically, what you had were virtual locations that are close to the traffic light. And once the ambulance approached this virtual point, the traffic light would get an information to switch. There's one problem with this kind of approach. On the one hand, you want to be as far as possible from the traffic light because you want to influence it as early as possible, because there might be traffic that you want to flow through that traffic light before the ambulance arrives. But if you're far away, then the ambulance might still take another route if you only have that one point that you are overriding as a trigger. What we do is we take into account the route, and the route has timestamps everywhere. So what we can do is simulate an ambulance that is 60 seconds in the future, driving exactly that route that the other one might drive as well. Think about maybe a video where you can slide forward, and that way we can influence the correct traffic light, but with sufficient time ahead for the traffic light to really get the traffic out of that crossroad.
And this also can be used, of course, then for barriers or for bollards to lift them or to lower them. Good. There's another question from the same person, maybe. How are forest roads taken into account in blue light routing? Mountain rescue vehicles with all-wheel drive can drive on such roads. Very long sentence, but I think you get it.
Could you please repeat?
How are forest roads taken into account in blue light routing? Mountain rescue vehicles with all-wheel drive can drive on such roads.
No, that's actually a good one. Because the data that we take in account deduces a routing network. We have seen that with the arrow graphics. But the raw data what we have to deduce this actually has very rich information. And that's usually the problem. If you buy data from big mapping companies, you get a pre-interpreted routing graph where you have different classes. Then those classes usually correspond to speeds that you can drive there. What we have in the data is information about the surface, about the width, about maybe if there is grass, and how big of a kind of track rails that you have. And with that information, we can deduce where you can go with an ATV or not. So this is a bit into the topic of the specialized routing for fire trucks, because this is specialized routing for ATVs. But it's interesting that people are already asking questions for the next webinar.
Very good. So let's stay with the data quality. Is there a quality of usable data similar across countries?
Well, the quality differs depending on the countries. And Germany is definitely one of the countries where we have seen very high quality. But we've been surprised, especially after INA, we got a lot of questions regarding, is this possible in my country? And we were saying, well, we don't have that information for every country, but we have investigated. And there are certain metrics where you can look into, and this is, for example, the total amount of force tracks that you have in that country, and then you compare it, for example, with other countries, and you can compare it also maybe with other data sets, and then you get information about how good it is. So we do have tools. I cannot give a general answer, but feel free to contact us and we will definitely give you answers for your country.
Good. Let's see what else we have. There is something coming also on the road network. We have lots of road work in progress. Is it possible to integrate those information all the time and delete them when finished? So if I get it right, the ambulance doing the road will be informed about them and avoid it. Am I right?
Yes, so you can take into account roadblocks. You either enter them manually, but the preferred way would to have an automated interface to take them into account from a third-party system. The problem in some systems are that the information might be there in a digital way, but not machine readable. Depends a bit on how the situation is. But yes, you can enter them at least manually, and you can also define a time span. And that time span, for example, might even be repeating for a construction site of a tunnel that is only active at night, which then blocks the tunnel every night for 3 months or something like this.
Good. So there are some questions about the integration into the CAD system. Maybe you can give some general information. One will be around how do we integrate, how does RescueTrack integrate with a dispatch system, with a CAD system, and can the information used for the next best strategy for dispatching vehicles, something around that.
So integrating in your CAD is definitely the way to go because you don't want a side process. So your CAD very likely is already using a routing engine, but is very likely also using not a specialized routing engine. But routing has a very simple interface. You have a start, you have a destination. What you need from there is either only the driving time, the estimated driving time, and for some use cases, you also need the geometry of the route, but that's all. So replacing a routing engine is a very simple task for a CAD vendor to do.
Good. Then what else we can find here? This is a very German question, or at least German-related question. Is the blue light routing integrated in the EVENA arrival time?
Every service that RescueTrack offers uses blue light routing.
So another question. We have lots of big events. Is it possible to insert into the card to know where the X is? I think it's a question about how do we handle roadblocks in general.
Well, in some countries, we have systems where we fully automatically import them, so no manual work at all. But in others, because of lack of machine-readable information, we need humans to take those PDFs and interpret them and draw those roadblocks manually.
Do you use OpenStreetMap data especially for the roads?
Yes, we do use OpenStreetMap data, but not only the roads, but also for many other things that I showed before. For example, the buildings, the entrances, the footways, and also information about public transport.
Can you tell a little bit also about the historic data that we take into consideration or into account for the routing?
I didn't get the second word. Please repeat.
Can you take some or give some information about the historic data, like floating car data we take into
The historic data. Yes, the historic data is deduced from data that is somehow integrated in RescueTrack. That's either through our own hardware, where we have many thousand ambulances equipped with, or any other system that uses the Rescue Track API to push the locations in. So that way we can get historic data.
So, and then following question to that is, what about live traffic information?
Live traffic,
Is it or not?
live traffic can be ingested the same way as roadblocks, because there's actually an industry standard which is called DATEX2. So if you have a source of live traffic that we should integrate, talk to us. Be aware that it might not always help to integrate live traffic. I've shown example where it may cause harm, but that's something that we need to explore a little bit in the industry, and that's good that you're asking that question.
Between cat routing and alarm in start driving of the ambulance, fire truck, police car might be half a minute have passed. How is the system resolving this gap? Might be that the cat routed vehicle is now in a bad spot past a certain spot.
That's very interesting. And yes, you do not only need to take in account the current location, but you also need to take the current bearing that the car has, because you cannot simply turn around at every location. So having only a starting point is not the full information. Adding the current direction of travel is good as well. And then calculating ahead where you're currently driving until the decision is made is also something. I am not aware of any CAD system which takes this in account yet, but would love to see that in a project that might improve the system further.
Another question might lead to another webinar. I know you can move ambulances depending on the daytime traffic, etc. I mean, relocate the ambulances. That is made by statistics on the months or real time always?
The system always works on the current state of the graph, and that is real time. So what we cannot do is simulate ahead or go back. And it's not a big average, but it's a current time of day decision.
So I think when I scroll through the questions, I think we got them.
Perfectly. Then we can finish nicely on time at exactly 3:30. So thank you, Daniel and Oliver, both for this webinar. And if anyone has any questions left, I'm sure they can contact you with the email that was previously on screen. And also the slides and the recording of this webinar will be shared soon on our website. So if anyone wants to revisit it, it will be available. So I'd like to, again, thank you both, and thank you all our viewers for attending this webinar, and wish you a nice rest of the day.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.